Political parties are made up of living, breathing people. They grow and evolve. And that's not some like abstract concept. It's happening here in Georgia. And for this video, we're gonna focus on the Georgia Republican Party. And in order to really understand these changes, we need some context. My name is Joseph, and this is AJC in Context. Hello, I am here with Greg Bluestein. Greg, thank you so much for joining us in the actual studio.
Yeah, I haven't been back here in months. It's weird being in the ghost room,
Yeah.
the ghostish AJC newsroom.
Right, like I've been seeing everybody through Zoom, so it's nice to like be around people for once. So the core of this video is explaining some of the partisan divides within the GOP. So maybe they're the disagreements on policy, maybe they're on how you actually conduct politics within the state. And I think no relationship is more emblematic of that infighting than Governor Kemp and Donald Trump. So I think first off, since I like to discuss policy first, in terms of policy, do they have any daylight between them? Like, do they actually disagree on anything of any real substantive issue?
That's a really good point, because not really. Yeah. I mean, Governor Kemp was on the same page as President Trump throughout most of his 4 years in office. There's a few things where the governor would get frustrated with, for instance, Hurricane Michael relief, but remember, the Trump administration blamed Democrats on some of those delays. Right. So that was one of the moments where I remembered the governor being most frustrated publicly, even saying he'd get in his pickup truck and drive to Washington himself to try to secure that relief money. Yeah. But otherwise, you rarely, you never really heard the governor ding or insult or attack or even criticize in the mildest manner President Trump throughout his 2 years, the first 2 years of Governor Kemp's term in office, and really the 4 years that the president was in office. And at the same time, for the first few months of the governor's tenure, President Trump was completely on board, saying he was one of the strongest governors in the South, one of his most, his proudest moments as a president endorsing a candidate, he would say, was Governor Kemp, because his endorsement, in his view, helped Kemp beat Stacey Abrams.
Do you think this Trump-Kemp rift signifies anything larger within the Republican Party? Yeah,
I mean, look, the Republican Party right now in Georgia and elsewhere in the nation is battling over President Trump's legacy, and that is what's happening in Georgia as we speak. Is there are pro-Trump politicians that are leveraging their close ties with the president, and there are others who caught the president's ire throughout the entire aftermath of the November election, who the president said didn't do enough to overturn, reverse, whatever verb you want to use, with the outcome of the election. And there are those like Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who caught it head on at first because he refused to do things that he said were illegal, that the president wanted him to do, like go back and add new requirements for some of those absentee ballots that the president said were indicative of widespread fraud. There's no proof to that whatsoever. Yeah. And then later on, you had Governor Kemp certify the election results and tell President Trump point blank in phone conversations they had that, hey, he's not calling a special session to try to overturn the election results. Right. He's not doing more, he's not acting more aggressively to try to reverse the election outcome. And in that process, suddenly Governor Kemp became public enemy number one to President Trump. Now he's got more enemies now. Right, he's got 7 Republican senators who voted to convict him in impeachment. He's got 10 Republican House members who voted to impeach him. So there's a broader field, but for a while there, the governor was at the top of all of President Trump's enemy lists.
Tia Mitchell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Tia is one of our greatest political reporters here. So what do you think happened that turned Georgia blue? Were hearts and minds actually changed, or was it just a turnout game where Democrats just ran up the score in the blue areas?
Well, I would say it's a little bit of both. You know, when you have a head-to-head matchup, one Democrat, one Republican, turnout's always part of the equation, but the candidates on the ballot also matter. And for this being a runoff, so it's not the normal November voting day that usually people are used to, then you also, it's not just about turnout, but it's about voter education so that voters understand why they even need to go back to polls in the first place. And of course, that was a little bit easier this time around because the races themselves were so high profile. I think the voter education was kind of built in with the attention. But again, turnout still matters, but also candidates matter. And what we saw in Georgia also is it's not just the candidates, but who is pushing the candidates. And so Donald Trump really had an effect, particularly on the Republican candidates. And it was both the positive effect of them clinging to him because they know his base is very loyal and they wanted those diehard Trump loyalists in the Republican Party to support them, Senator Perdue and Senator Loeffler. But it also mattered because Donald Trump simultaneously was passing around misinformation and disinformation about our election system, the integrity of your vote. Will your vote count? Will your vote matter? And that had a negative effect on that same base. And that hurt Loeffler and Perdue at the polls. Meanwhile, Democrats were pretty unified, pretty on message. Again, focused a lot on turnout, focused a lot on also contrasts with the Republican candidates. For example, Ossoff and Warnock talked a lot about wanting more stimulus, wanting to do better with coronavirus relief. And so that helped them, and ultimately both Democrats won.
In terms of policies that would animate the Trump base, do we see them more as economic issues like $15 minimum wage, TPP, NAFTA, or do we see them as more cultural issues like Second Amendment, birth control, and things of that nature? Which of those do you think animates the Trump base more?
I would say for Trump's base, it is those cultural issues, but can be more accurately described as white identity politics. And I'm talking about, this is the diehard far right MAGA Trumpers. And so anything that can be considered under that umbrella of protecting a stereotypical white evangelical Christian suburban or rural way of life is embraced by them. So that includes being against abortion, embracing access to guns, more than you would just say the Second Amendment. We're talking about open carry and things like that. Being anti-immigrant, being more willing to question whether institutional racism has negative effects on people of color. Even though a lot of rural whites are poor and depend on government safety nets, it almost seems ironic or counterproductive, but you'll still see a lot of far right MAGA Trumpers, talking about safety nets in a negative way and saying people need to get off welfare and you don't need more employment, you need to go out and get a job. And so those are things that you'll hear from that contingent of the Republican Party, which really makes up, as of right now, the majority of, the Republican base.
What do you think about our place in national politics, and do you see it lasting?
Yeah, look, going forward, Georgia will continue to be the center of the nation's political universe outside of Washington, of course, because look, we've got a 2022 election that's already gearing up. David Perdue's already talking about a potential rematch against Reverend Warnock, who was elected to a 2-year term. He was elected to fill out the remaining 2 years of Johnny Isakson's term. So people forget he's got to run for a full 6-year term next year. You've got a potential rematch between Governor Kemp and Stacey Abrams. She's running to be the first black woman elected as governor in the nation's history. So you've got that momentous potential rematch. And even if she doesn't run, which I think she will run, but even if she doesn't, you'll have a very, very competitive match for governor's race. And then remember, maybe the most important criminal investigation in Metro Atlanta's history is going on right now with the DA of Fulton County, Fani Willis, investigating whether or not President Trump violated state election law by pressuring Brad Raffensperger to overturn the results of the election.
So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. You've treated the population of Georgia so badly. Between you and your governor, who was down at 21, he was down 21 points, and like a I endorsed him and he got elected.
So we're still in the spotlight, and that's not even counting Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's not even counting our very competitive suburban House races that will be back up next year in Congress, and that's not even counting all the voting rights legislation, all the action that's happening right now in the Georgia General Assembly.
Gerrymandering can be a boring topic, but they're going to redistrict this year, I'm thinking?
This year. Redistricting will be at the end of the year, and as famed UGA political scientist Charles Bullock always says, it is the most political process in America. Yeah. Nothing about that is not political, right? It's all about drawing district lines to help incumbents or help favorites of the people in power. And right now, the Republicans control every lever of that process.
So we would love to hear your thoughts on any and all of these topics. So go ahead in the comment section down below and leave your carefully worded and respectful comments. And while you're down there, go ahead and press that subscribe button if you haven't already. Press the like button if you liked this video. Favorite if you really liked it. But as always, my name is Joseph, and this is AJC in Context.